All right, so today in this video, we're gonna go over how to improve your splits. Now, splits are a great way to focus on something objectively and kind of work towards a given amount of mobility. The problem is, a lot of people will encounter, they hit a roadblock, they just can't improve the flexibility. So I'm gonna give you a couple ideas on how to sequence activity to bring heat to the right areas and then add your stretching. All right, so one of the easiest things to do to bring heat to the posterior chain, glutes and hamstrings and low back is to do a bent leg bridge. So do this for about a minute. Don't count reps, just time it for a minute to bring heat into the glutes, hamstrings, and low back. Feet about hips width distance, drive the hips up and down, squeeze the glutes at the top of the motion. All right. Then I want to add some heat to the hip flexors. The hip flexors will bind up and you won't be able to open up the hip any farther. So I like to just bring some heat into the hip flexors by driving the knee up with control and squeezing through the hip flexors. Make sure, I'll turn to the side, that you're not getting into an excessive arch. Bring the core pulled in tight as you drive that knee. Do 1 minute per side on your hip flexors. The last on this combination is to do a little ballistic stretching of the hamstrings and loosen them up. So depending on the level of flexibility you have, you don't need to go really aggressive on the swings. These are things that we used to do. I've been coaching gymnastics amongst a lot of other things that I'm doing for almost 30 years. So we start off with leg swings. It's not a kick like you're doing in martial arts. We're just swinging the leg up and down with some nice control to loosen up the hamstrings, bring some heat into the hamstrings. So now that we're working into the ranges of motion, the stretching, we have pre-splits or warm-ups for the splits before you get into just diving into it. I always like to get my clients to loosen up their hip flexors. So we're starting off in a nice lunge position. Now we're shifting forward. We're holding each of these stretches for 45 seconds to a minute. Abs pulled in, loosening up. The stretch, if you're doing it right, is across the upper quad. And then we switch it to what we call the high split. Lean forward, pull the toes up towards you. Lean forward, loosen up the hamstrings. Make sure you do both sides for 45 seconds to a minute. All right, now we aren't working necessarily on the middle split, but if we get the tissue of the adductors like a middle split loosened up, it's gonna help us when we slide out into our side split. So I always like to use what we call a froggy split. In between, I'm gonna place my hands down on the floor like a tabletop. I'm gonna walk my knees out, let my toes drift outward, try to keep my heels outside the width of my knees. From here, try to open up as far as my knees can go. Again, 45 seconds here. All right, so now that we've done all of our work on our split, now it's time to hold our splits. Now the secret to this is holding it at an intensity that's not so high that your muscles relax. So always adjust one hand on each side, slide out, keep that knee tucked back, under in the back, and slowly work your way down. Let your body open up naturally. As you get more and more comfortable, then you can start to practice leaning forward, leaning back to open up the hip flexor until you feel like you're ready to go all the way down.